Is Hoya carnosa a succulent? Well, I've always thought of Hoya carnosa as a succulent because of its thick, fleshy leaves, but technically, it's not considered a true succulent. It's actually part of the Apocynaceae family, commonly known as the milkweed family. But regardless of its classification, caring for it often involves similar practices to succulents, like avoiding overwatering and providing plenty of bright, indirect light. How to care for Hoya carnosa? Caring for my Hoya carnosa has been a delightful journey. I've found that it thrives in bright, indirect light, so I place it near a window with filtered sunlight. As for watering, I let the soil dry out between waterings to prevent root rot. It doesn't need frequent fertilizing, but I give it a balanced houseplant fertilizer diluted to half strength during the growing season. And one thing I've learned is that it appreciates a bit of humidity, so I occasionally mist its leaves or place a pebble tray nearby. How to propagate Hoya carnosa? How to root a Hoya carnosa cutting? Propagation has been an exciting experiment with my Hoya carnosa. I've had success propagating it through stem cuttings. I take a healthy stem cutting with at least 2 leaves and let the cut end callus over for a few days. Then I plant it in a well-draining potting mix and keep it consistently moist until roots develop. It usually takes a few weeks for roots to form, and once they do, I transfer the cutting into its own pot. Is Hoya carnosa toxic to cats? As a cat owner, I've always been cautious about the plants I bring into my home, and Hoya carnosa is considered toxic to cats if ingested. Its sap contains compounds that can cause gastrointestinal upset, such as vomiting and diarrhea, if your furry friend decides to nibble on it. So, it's best to keep it out of reach or opt for pet-friendly alternatives if you have curious pets around. How fast does Hoya carnosa grow? The growth rate of my Hoya carnosa has been rather moderate, but it can vary depending on factors like light, temperature, and humidity. Typically, it produces new leaves and stems slowly, especially in lower light conditions. However, given the right conditions and proper care, it can pick up its pace a bit during the growing season, producing new growth every few weeks. How often to water Hoya carnosa? Watering my Hoya carnosa has been all about finding the right balance. I've learned to water it thoroughly, but less frequently, allowing the soil to dry out slightly between waterings. During the growing season, usually spring and summer, I water it more often, about once every 1 to 2 weeks. But in the winter months when its growth slows down, I space out the waterings even more to prevent overwatering and root rot. When do Hoya carnosa bloom? The blooming cycle of my Hoya carnosa is quite fascinating. It typically blooms in late spring to early summer, although this can vary depending on its environment and care. The blooms are like little clusters of star-shaped flowers that emerge from the stems, and they have this incredible sweet fragrance that fills the room, especially in the evenings. It's always a delightful surprise when it bursts into bloom. How to get Hoya carnosa to bloom? Encouraging my Hoya carnosa to bloom has been a bit of trial and error, but I've found a few tricks that seem to work. Firstly, it needs plenty of bright, indirect light to initiate flower bud formation, so I make sure it gets enough sunlight. Secondly, I give it a slight drop in temperature at night, mimicking its natural habitat conditions. And finally, I avoid disturbing it too much when it's in bud, as even minor disruptions can cause the buds to drop prematurely. How to repot Hoya carnosa? Repotting my Hoya carnosa has been a straightforward process. I typically wait until it's outgrown its current pot, or when I notice its roots circling the bottom. When the time comes, I gently remove it from its pot, being careful not to damage the roots and shake off excess soil. Then I choose a slightly larger pot with good drainage, fill it with fresh potting mix, and carefully place the plant in the center. After repotting, I give it a thorough watering to help it settle into its new home. Hoya carnosa versus Hoya pubicalix. Comparing Hoya carnosa and Hoya pubicalix is like comparing 2 different personalities within the same family. While they share some similarities, they also have distinct characteristics that set them apart. Hoya carnosa, often known as the wax plant, is cherished for its glossy, succulent-like leaves and clusters of fragrant, star-shaped flowers. It's a classic choice for indoor gardeners, appreciated for its ease of care and charming blooms. On the other hand, Hoya pubicalix, commonly referred to as the pink silver plant, boasts elongated, lance-shaped leaves with silver flecks and striking pinkish-red flowers. It tends to have a more vigorous growth habit and may require a bit more attention compared to its cousin, but the payoff of its exquisite blooms is worth the effort. Both are stunning additions to any plant collection, each with its own unique allure. Hoya carnosa versus Australis. My Hoya carnosa is a cascading champion. Its thick, fleshy leaves trail beautifully, and it seems to put out new growth constantly. It's a forgiving plant, bouncing back from underwatering scares like a champ. The Hoya australis, on the other hand, feels a bit more delicate. The leaves are thinner and more prone to dropping if I miss a watering. It also seems to grow slower, but it makes up for it with its beautiful, marbled variegation. Hoya carnosa, Stardust versus Freckles. If you love shimmer, the Hoya carnosa Stardust is your dream plant. The silvery speckles splashed across its leaves catch the light like a disco ball. It's become the centerpiece of my living room. The Freckles, however, offers a more subtle kind of beauty. The tiny white dots are like constellations scattered across the deep green leaves. It has a calming, understated presence that I adore. Hoya carnosa Exotica versus Crimson Princess. The Exotica is a drama queen in the best way possible. The curled, lime green leaves are unlike anything else in my collection. It's a slow grower, but the wait is worth it for its unique look. Hoya Crimson Princess, however, is all about color. The vibrant pink splashes on its leaves are stunning, and it seems to grow much faster than the Exotica. It's a constant source of compliments from visitors. Hoya carnosa versus Hoya bella. My Hoya carnosa is a flowering machine. Those clusters of delicate star-shaped blooms are a true delight, and their sweet fragrance fills the room. Hoya bella, though, is all about foliage. The heart-shaped leaves are a lovely change from the classic oval shape of the carnosa. It has a more compact growth habit too, making it perfect for smaller spaces. Hoya carnosa versus Crimson Queen. The carnosa might be the classic Hoya, but Hoya Crimson Queen definitely steals the show. The deep burgundy leaves with splashes of pink are simply stunning. It's a bit fussier than the regular carnosa, requiring more consistent watering, but the reward is definitely worth the extra effort.